Hey everybody, what is up? Welcome back to some more Pokemon action. I'm your host Ryan, and today we're going to be taking a look at the VGC team that I've been using for quite a while now. It started off pretty simply. I just kind of threw things together, and then it gradually changed into what you see now. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that this is the final version of the team, but for right now, I think it's final enough to decide. There is one major change that I was going to put for this team, but I came up with it as I was getting prepared for this video, so I haven't even been able to test it to see if it's a viable change. I will outline that change, not in depth, but I'll go over that change. If I do make the change, I will not re-upload this video, but I will annotate this video to a smaller analysis for the change. So hopefully I'll tell you where that is if I do make the change, and then you'll see that. Also, as you can see, this is the thumbnail. On the top right corner, there should hopefully be a QR code for this team. Not sure how QR codes work, and I hope it works the way I'm hoping it works. So if I can put it there on the black background, it should work theoretically. But in addition to that, in the description below, there should be an Imgur album that will contain not only this QR team, but a QR code for the remaining teams that I will make and analyze in the future. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over this team in ascending order of easiest to more complicated, because there's some pretty complex EVs going on some of these Pokemon. So let's get straight into it. The first Pokemon that we're going to talk about is Arachne. Now, Arachnid's pretty straightforward. As you'll see, we're running a Brave Nature that gives us plus attack and minus speed, so it's very, very handy for Trick Room. If you know correctly, Arachnid is actually slower than Marowak, so this makes Arachnid basically the go-to counter for Marowak. It resists the fire-type Flare Blitz, and that is just fantastic. The ability is going to be Water Bubble. Water Bubble does 3 different things if you're not aware. It prevents the Pokemon from being burnt, so Arachne cannot be burnt ever. Never, never, never. It gives it a fire resistance, so even though Arachne is Water Bug, which would make it neutral to fire, it actually is resistant to fire. So that's actually really fantastic. But the coup d'etat of this is that Water Bubble also doubles the base power of all water type attacks. So it's sort of like huge power, but it works for both special attacks and physical attacks, so it's really, really powerful. And in order to really make use of that, we are going to be running the Waterium Z. This is just for ease of explanation, this is a nuke of attack. It's most likely one of the strongest attacks in the game, especially if you pair it up with Liquidation, which is what we do here. And just to sort of exemplify that, the base power of a Hydro Vortex coming off of Arachne using Liquidation as the base has a base 320 physical attack. Now that my friends, is quite powerful. So basically, Arachnid is very straightforward. You're most likely going to be just throwing out water type attacks willy-nilly. As long as they don't have a Gastrodon on the field or on their team, you should be able to throw out a Liquidation with no worries whatsoever, because not many things want to switch on that. So just to outline the attacks, we've got Protect. It's pretty straightforward. If you want to Protect for a turn, get Trick Room up, or you don't like the matchup but you don't want to switch out, Protect is very important. Wide Guard is actually pretty important for this team, because I do have a pretty big rock weakness. As you saw, we have Vikavolt and we have Arachnid. So what this allows us to do is avoid Rock Slide for a turn, which is pretty important. It also lets us stop Muddy Water from hitting us. Not that we're really scared of Muddy Water, but it's there. Helps against Earthquake, even though Earthquake's not super threatening to this team. And it stops... One of the more important things it stops is Blizzard from Ninetales. Arachnid's a really solid lead into Ninetales, because Ninetales tend to just run Blizzard and spam Blizzard, and even if the Ninetales chooses to go for Freeze Dry, you can handle the Freeze Dry pretty well. So it's a very safe lead into Ninetales. Now obviously Liquidation's on the set. That's the go-to attack right there. It's very strong. It's very, very strong. It also has a chance to lower attack, defense, I think. It has a chance to decrease defense, so that's even better than lowering their attack. So overall, it's just a fantastic move, even without Arachnide's ability. So that's great. And then, I've been kind of bouncing in between Lunge and Leech Life as the 4th slot. Lunge gives Arachnid a little bit of utility in that it drops the target's attack. So it's good in 1v1s against things like if you're fighting a Garchomp and you can't beat it without the attack drop, you go for the Lunge. But I kind of realized that Leech Life is a little bit better because even though Arachnide's base attack is pretty low, the extra healing is very nice for the survivability. So that's what I went for there. Now, we're going to talk about the EVs. The EVs and IVs are pretty simple. The IVs for this entire team is pretty simple, actually. But the EVs for Arachnid specifically are incredibly simple. 252 HP, 252 attack, 4 special defense. There's not really any attacks that Arachnid wants to have a specialized EV spread for. There just really isn't. I couldn't find anything that Arachnid barely survives, and I would have to change around some EVs to figure that out. Like you're not going to be surviving a Tapu Koko Thunderbolt. You're not going to be surviving a Tapu Lele Psychic as long as it's modest. So there's a lot of things that there's no point in specializing an EV spread for Arachnid. If you look around, there's probably not going to be very many specialized Arachnids. This is pretty much what you're going to run. We run max attack because that's very important. Remember, Arachnid does not have a lot of base attack to begin with, and even though its ability is really strong, just powering it home with the 252 attack is very important. And then 4 special defense, just because an extra point in special defense is nice. It has base 130 special attack, or base 132, I believe, special defense. So that's just to make use of that. Now again, like I said, there aren't really any defensive milestones that Arachnid hits. There's nothing really to look out for. So most of the notes and damage calcs here are for offensively. So just to give some context to Hydro Vortex, the Z move, you 1-hit KO Tapu Lele, you 1-hit KO Tapu Koko. There's not a single fire type that wants to take this. In addition, you come very close to 1-hit KOing Garchomp, which is fantastic. And there's really not much else. Celesteela doesn't want to take this. Nothing wants to take this. And just to prove that nothing wants to switch on an Arachnid, a defensive Tapu Fini, the Calm Mind variant on the damage calculator that you can find on the internet, Liquidation does almost, just barely 30% to Tapu Fini. If that doesn't explain just how strong Liquidation is coming off of Arachnid, it really should. I mean, Tapu Fini is very bulky. It resists Liquidation, and you're doing 1/3 of its health in a single resisted attack. So that's Arachnid. Not really, like I said, not many damage calcs to talk about. Next up, I want to talk about Hariyama. Now, here is where I put the little annotation here and say, this is where we most likely will change the team, and I'll get into why, but what I might do here is swap out Hariyama for Incineroar, and I'll explain it at the end, because you'll kind of understand through my explanation. But Hariyama is just as basic as Arachnid. We've got Brave Nature, again, plus attacks minus speed. The ability is Guts, which gives you more attack if you are under a status condition, so that's Sleep, Poison, or Burn, and we're gonna give it a Flame Orb because that automatically burns us. Now obviously we will be taking damage, 6% of your health every turn, but Hariyama is actually, believe it or not, a little bit frail in this meta, so that's not the worst thing in the world. Our attacks are Fake Out, which is the main reason Hariyama is on the team. Fake Out just guarantees a Trick Room up, especially if you pair it with Mimikyu. No matter what, you're gonna get a Trick Room up on turn 1 if you get the Fake Out off. So that's fantastic. Close Combat is Stab. +1 from the Flame Orb Guts means that you will be knocking a lot of things out. You do a hell of a lot of damage to things like Porygon too. Then we've got Heavy Slam. Heavy Slam's pretty good. If you have Trick Room up and there's a Tapu Lele, you one-shot the Lele, you one-shot Koko. Overall, it's a pretty strong move. It's also really good at taking out opposing Mimikyus. Heavy Slam will always one-shot those Mimikyus. Wow, that was a whistle, though. It's not good. Then the final is Knock Off. Knock Off is just pure utility. You're not going to be getting many KOs with it. but as you see, you might actually. So the EVs again and IVs again, exactly the same as Arachne, 252 HP, 252 attack, and 4 special defense, 0 speed IVs. Again, with Arachne, there's not that many things that this particular Hariyama can survive, or just barely survive, so you need to change things around. If you were running Assault Vest and Thick Fat, this EV spread would be 1,000 times different. It would be more specialized because that thing can survive things. However, Burnt Hariyama doesn't really have good survivability, so the best option you can do is just go for the max HP, so you can take maybe 1 hit, so you can get off at least a close combat or a knockoff. That's pretty much it. So just to sort of understand the knockoff potential, you've got a 68.8% chance to one-hit KO a Alolan Marowak with knockoff. Now, the one thing to note here is that Marowak will one-shot your Hariyama with Flare Blitz, because again, we don't have Thick Fat. So something to really note here is that you have to make sure that the Marowak does not have 0 speed, because if you're running 0 speed Hariyama with Brave Nature, you will underspeed an Alolan Marowak with 31 speed, but a Brave Nature. So you will underspeed that only if it isn't 0. There's a few ways to check that out. Obviously, just straight up giving up your Hariyama 1 turn to a Flare Blitz will answer that question for you. So if you're in a best of 3, there you go. That's one way to find out. Another way to find out is, I believe, Lickable. Well, no, I was wrong. I went to go double check the speed things, and there's actually nothing in our team that can reliably catch the speed of a Marowak. So realistically, it's just kind of a toss-up. But again, you only have a 68.8% chance to one-hit KO Marowak. So if you do outspeed, you might not KO it, but you will get rid of its thick club, so you will guarantee a survive. But all in all, I wouldn't really recommend Hariyama into Marowak. You've got Arachne. Arachne's a perfect counter to Marowak. You've also got Drampa, who's also a perfect counter to Marowak, so there you go. So as long as you have a burn, you'll one-shot Raichu, Alolan Raichu with knockoff. You will one-shot Gigalith with close combat. You'll one-shot Tapu Lele and Tapu Bulu and Mimikyu, as long as this disguise is broken, with Heavy Slam. Of course, you need the burn for this, and of course, these are just standard. I believe, a more defensive Gigalith will survive. Raichu can't survive. Mimikyu can't survive no matter what. Tapu Lele can't survive either, and if you have a more defensive Bulu, it can survive. But again, standard sets, you can one-shot this. Now, here's my issue with Hariyama and why I'm considering replacing it, and who I'm considering replacing it. Hariyama's just not bulky. I don't understand its purpose. So Fighting Stab hits things like Drampa, Kartana. That's really, off the top of my head, that's about it. There isn't really many things that are weak to fighting in this meta. So that's all already not exactly great. Now, obviously, a +1 close combat from Hariyama is going to hurt like hell, but its staying power is pretty low, and when you have, like, for example, Tapu Lele is really common, and Tapu Lele just completely shuts down your Fake Out, which is something you obviously don't want. So that's already sort of, I don't really know. But on top of that, since there aren't any defensive milestones that we can achieve, and it also has trouble with Marowak, it's not great into Marowak. It's an option, but it's not great. And, overall, it just doesn't want to take damage. From all the battles that I've had, I've noticed that I'm not too keen on using Hariyama unless the Fake Out is guaranteed. So, with that in mind, I'm considering switching in Incineroar. Now, what Incineroar does is it beats Marowak 100%. Now, obviously, I already have 2 Marowak counters, so I don't really need it, which is understandable. But it also means that we can start Fake Out leads against Tapu Lele teams, because Tapu Lele cannot touch Incineroar. So if I start Incineroar, hoping for the fake out, and they start Lele, it doesn't matter because then I can just go for damage. I'm not forced to switch out my Hariyama because I'm not weak to Psychic, and that's fantastic. In addition, hopefully at some point we'll be getting Intimidate Incineroar, and that already offers more utility than Hariyama's with just straight up fake out. So that's my option for right now. This is what the team is running because obviously I kind of want Intimidate Incineroar. I will be testing out regular Incineroar, Blaze Incineroar, and we'll see how that goes. So moving on, we've got Lickable. Now Lickable, so what you might notice from this team is that it's basically a copy of the team that won regionals. However, to be quite fair, the general guideline of this team was already made before I noticed that team. I was just using Oranguru instead of Porygon 2, and I was using Mudsdale instead of Lickable. Now, I tried Magnezone, but I actually really like Lickable here. So, nature is quiet, pretty obvious. Ability is Levitate, you have no other choice. But Levitate's really good. You do miss out on terrain effects, so you won't get grassy terrain. Psychic terrain, you can get faked out in psychic terrain. Priority in general will affect Lickable in psychic terrain. Grassy terrain, I think I already said. Misty terrain, you can get status now because of Levitate, and most importantly, you do not get the electric boost in electric terrain. So it's a bit of a drawback for ground immunity. However, I think it's actually pretty important, and I'll get to that in a second. Now, the item is Assault Vest. I have been using choice specs, but I came across a few calculations, and basically, I settled that Assault Vest makes a little bit more sense than not Assault Vest, and I will show you that. I'll explain that in the calculations when we get there. So the attacks are pretty straightforward. Unlike Magnezone, Lickable actually has really good coverage attacks. Plus, its stabs are just slightly better, in my opinion. We've got Thunderbolt, pretty straightforward. We've got Bug Buzz, which is actually, believe it or not, a real killer. I really like using Bug Buzz a lot. We've also got Flash Cannon. It did replace a Magnezone, so the Flash Cannon is pretty important for things like Tapu Lele and Bulu. And then finally, we've got Energy Ball. I wanted to remove the Gastrodon pressure from Drampa, so I put Energy Ball on Lickable. Now, let's get into the calculations. Actually, this is a little bit more complicated than it may seem offhand, and this is exactly why I went through the Assault Vest over choice specs. Now, the EVs themselves are pretty straightforward. We've got 252 HP, 252 special attack, 4 special defense. Makes the most sense. 4 special defense just coincides with the Assault Vest, and 0 speed. Now, here's why I like Vikavolt over Magnezone. Vikavolt basically counters any bug type. There's really not much most of the common bug types can do. So it counters Buzzwole, it counters Pheromosa as far as I'm aware. It's also just a complete counter to Kartana without choice specs, even without choice specs, sorry. Kartana does about, at most, 40% to a Vikavolt, so no matter what, it's always a 3-hit KO. But even without choice specs, Vikavolt 1-hit KOs Kartana with Bug Buzz. Easy enough. So Vikavolt, if you need a Kartana counter, Vikavolt is your man. Other things is that the reason I like Assault Vest is that it beats things like Tapu Lele and Tapu Koko in 1v1s. Tapu Koko, just, honestly, any electric type really can't handle Vikavolt. Xurkitree, Kartana, Magnezone, I believe. I didn't check that one out, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, but I think if it beats Koko and Xurkitree, it beats Magnezone. And it beats most electric types in 1v1s because Bug Buzz hits them, and even Thunderbolt. Thunderbolt's like a 2-hit KO on Koko, even without the electric terrain boost. The Assault Vest is really important against Lele specifically because Tapu Lele has a 25% chance to 1-hit KO Vikavolt, and with specs, you only have a 25% chance to 1-hit KO Lele. So, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, 25% chance on both sides of the field. compared to a 0% chance to one-hit KO us, and we can guarantee a survive and a KO on the second turn. So that's why I went Assault Vest. Also, it beats Garchomp, believe it or not. Rock Slide only does a maximum of 40%, somewhere around 40%. So that is actually really fantastic. And Bug Buzz with Choice Specs have a chance to one-hit KO, but you do two-hit KO with Bug Buzz without Choice Specs. So it was really nice. Also, something really nice to note, modest Pokemon, Nihilego and Arcanine, you survive their stab, so you can take a Power Gem and you can take a Flamethrower. Now granted, you can't really do too much back to these, but that's really nice. Like if you're in a situation where there's a Nihilego and a Celesteela, and you have a way to deal with the Nihilego in the back, but you need to beat the Celesteela, you can comfortably go for a Thunderbolt onto the Celesteela, and the Nihilego will most likely think that you'll go down to a Power Gem, so they won't double into the Vikavolt, but you will survive. Same thing with the Arcanine. Like if you're in a situation where you can handle the Arcanine, but you need to kill the Celesteela, you're safe to stay in as long as it's special. You can't survive physical. But some other calculations that aren't 100%, or if they are 100%, there's sort of like a catch. So modest Nihilego with Life Orb, 31% chance, 31.3% chance to win a KO you. So even if you notice it's Life Orb and even if you notice it's modest, if you're confident, you can stay in on the Power Gem pretty easily. 70% chance, or 69, I guess, 69% chance to survive is pretty good. That's a very good chance. But even better than that, modest Life Orb Arcanine, 6.3% chance to one-hit KO you. So that is really good. You can, if it's a special Arcanine, you can basically stay in as long as it's not Specs. Even Specs you could probably stay in, but you don't have a good chance to survive. Finally, Salazzle, just sort of to give you an example of things that aren't commonly used, but you might come across. A Salazzle Fire Blast, you always survive it as long as it's not Life Orb. But the catch here is that you only one-hit KO Salazzle 75% of the time. It has a 25% chance to survive, so that's something to just consider. But yeah, I mean, I like Vikavolt way more than Magnezone. It has better, in my opinion, it has better typing for the meta. It also has a better bulk and better coverage. So that's just my opinion on Vikavolt. That's why Vikavolt's here to stay. And moving on, we are talking about Drampa. Now, Drampa is the reason this team has existed. I built this team around Drampa in the first place. Now, obviously, it's changed, and Drampa's not exactly the limelight of the team, but it still does its job fantastically. So, quiet, pretty obvious. I don't need to explain that anymore. Now, the ability, Drampa has 3 abilities, and they're all fairly solid. Sap Sipper, Berserk, and Cloud9. Now, Cloud9 is the lesser of the 3, but the more that weather is popular, the better that Cloud9 is. So Cloud9's still an option. Berserk's a pretty good option too. I was using that in the beginning, but I settled on Sap Sipper because Sap Sipper gives us direct counters to Celesteela, who absolutely loves spamming Leech Seed, and it counters Bulu, which is perfect. You have a literal switch into a Tapu Bulu. Let's just say, imagine a Tapu Bulu had Choice Band and it had the Z Crystal. You can switch a Drampa into that. That's just, it eats it up, literally. So that's why I settled for Sap Sipper. It also gives you, in case Sleep ever really comes to play, it gives you a counter to Sleep Powder, so that's really good. Life Orb is there. I tried Assault Vest. I think if you're going to go Berserk, Assault Vest is the better option, because Life Orb does not trigger Berserk. If you're at half and you dip below half with Life Orb, you will not get your boost. It has to be damage from the enemy team. I'm not even sure if Sand would work on that. That's something to consider. But yeah, Life Orb's really good. It gives you the power. It's just lovely. And also, when I was using Assault Vest, I was missing out on protecting. Just a little thing that I like to do with Drampa is to protect. So, speaking of which, protect. Hyper Voice. Now, I choose Hyper Voice over Dragon Stab because, honestly, I just do not understand the point of Dragon Stab in this meta. If you have no other choice, I don't see why not. But Hyper Voice does just as much as you need. Hyper Voice is very strong. You get 2-hit KOs on pretty much everything, even though it's a spread move. You still do like 20% to a Celesteela, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's also a Celesteela, so it's pretty important. Now, Drampa has a lot of coverage moves. A lot. So realistically, what you put in your Drampa depends on what you need. And one thing that I don't like about Drampa is that if you go for the standard builds, which is usually, I think, Draco Meteor, Ice Beam, and Energy Ball, or Flamethrower over Ice Beam, you literally can't do anything to Marowak. And Drampa is one of the best Marowak counters because it's immune to the Ghost Stab and it resists the Flare Blitz, and Flare Blitz damages him. So I think that's a really good counter. So that's why I went Shadow Ball. I think Shadow Ball is very important. It also gives you something against all the ghosts. So Gengar, Mimikyu, Trevenant, Dhelmise, Decidueye, Palossand, etc. Now, obviously, those Pokemon that I listed are hit by other moves. Not that it really matters, but yeah. So, and to complement the Shadow Ball, because of what resists, I went Focus Blast. I think Focus Blast is really good. I'm surprised people don't run it more, especially with Gigalith on the rise. You one-shot Gigalith, and that is very important. Gigalith is a monster that can destroy this team, so Focus Blast is very, very important, especially since Arachne is the best at one-shotting Gigalith, but Arachne also gets one-shot by the Z Rock Slide, so that's a thing to look out for. Now we're going to get into EVs, and we're finally done with very straightforward EVs. This is an EV spread that I randomly discovered while doing calculations, and the damage calculator suggested this, and I did some calcs with it, and I really liked it. So we've got 196 HP, 60 defense, and 252 special attack, 0 speed. Now what this does is it gives you a couple of things that I really, really appreciate. Jolly Garchomp, Dragon Claw, you survive. Jolly Kartana Sacred Sword, you survive. So even, I'd say generally these Pokemon are running Jolly, so it's a pretty safe bet to stay in against them and just go for an attack. Your Hyper Voice 2-hit KOs Kartana. Your Hyper Voice, I think, 2-hit KOs Garchomp, so that's really good. As long as you can get Trick Room up that turn, you will be able to KO them the next turn, so that's fantastic. Something to note, Adamant Kartana, 18.8% chance to 1-hit KO, so Kartana's a really safe bet. You lose to a 20% chance, that's okay, that's fine. I mean, damage rolls suck, but there you go. Adamant Garchomp, a little bit more risky. You've got a 43.8% chance to get KO'd by that, so it's still in your favor, but it's a little bit more risky. Either way. Also, what the spread, the loss of the HP kind of concerned me, because it's like, I know I can't take a Moonblast from a Lele or a Finny, that's just not possible. But what about the Dazzling Gleam? Now you can survive Modest, Coco, and Lele Dazzling Gleam. Minor note to the Coco, that's a Life Orb damage calc, so you will always survive a Tapu Koko Dazzling Gleam, unless they're choice specs. But choice specs is pretty rare and uncommon on Coco, so that's cool. But Modest Lele, Modest Life Orb Tapu Lele, 43.8% chance. So again, in your favor, a little bit risky though. Pretty nice. And as I touched on before, Sapsipper beats Celesteela and Bulu. With these defensive EVs, you can now take, I believe, multiple Heavy Slams instead of 2 from Celesteela. I'm going to check that real quick. No, you could still only take 2 Heavy Slams from a Celesteela, so this particular Drampa is not the greatest against Celesteela, but it's good against non-Heavy Slam variants. Anything that's not running Heavy Slam, you can easily beat. And like I said, you know, Shadow Ball beats Marowak, and that's just fantastic. So moving on, we've got Porygon 2. Again, pretty straightforward. We've got Relaxed, we've got Download. It's better than Trace in my opinion for multiple reasons. There's not many abilities that you want to trace in this meta. Eviolite, pretty self-explanatory. Recover, Trick Room, Thunderbolt, Ice Beam. It's pretty straightforward. There's no stab here because normal stab isn't the best, and bolt beam is so much better. Recover or protect, it's sort of your option. I'm trying out recover right now. I like it a little bit more. Protect is also pretty viable. So moving on, we've got the EVs. We got 252 HP, 160 defense, 96 special defense. Remember, we're a relaxed nature. What this actually allows some really nice calculations. All of the following are Z moves. So Tapu Bulu, Woodhammer, Z move in grassy terrain, you always survive. Garchomp Z Earthquake, you always survive. Tapu Lele Z Psychic Modest, you always survive, and that's in psychic terrain. So that's fantastic. You just eat that stuff up. There's not really once you see those, there's really no other damage calcs you need to see. Unfortunately, Brave, Guts, Hariyama with the burn, 62.5% chance to 1-hit KO. There's really no way around that. You can max out the defense if you want, and you will survive it. But then you have some issues against Tapu Lele. And I think surviving a Z Woodhammer from Bulu in grassy terrain is is fine. So I like having the mixed defense on Porygon 2 because this means I can take a double from anything, and I love it. So just to say, without a download boost, without special attack, you do 2-hit KO Garchomp, so that's really important. And also, just a side note, not what my set is running, but something you might want to consider. Download does tend to bolster the defense. Bolster the attack of Porygon 2. So if you're finding either Thunderbolt or Ice Beam, I highly suggest, if you're going to replace anything, replace Thunderbolt. Or maybe Ice Beam. I don't know. Maybe you don't really need to hit Garchomp for a 2-hit KO. I'm not really sure. But if you really want to make use of that attack stat, Return is a phenomenal option. It's base 102, +1. It's going to do some decent damage, so that's something to consider. Moving on, and finally we've got Mimikyu. Now Mimikyu is the star trick consider of the team. Relaxed as usual. A lot of people run max attack, max speed to 1-hit KO Tapu Lele and stuff. I don't buy it. I don't think it's worth it. I think what we're running is the go-to for an actual dedicated Trick Room setter. Disguise is why Mimikyu is so good. It literally can take doubles from everything, and as long as your opponent doesn't have if there's a Marowak, don't start off Mimikyu, because if they break the disguise, you will go down. So something to remember there. There are a couple of matchups that Mimikyu does not do well in, but that's why we have Porygon 2, and most of those matchups are ghost types. So again, that's why we have Porygon 2. Mental Herb, it literally means that Mimikyu will 99% of the time get Trick Room up. That is just impossible. It's almost impossible to stop Mimikyu. Trick Room, Pain Split, Will-O-Wisp, Play Rough, pretty obvious. Mimikyu has low base HP, so Pain Split works wonders. Will-O-Wisp burns. Our EV spread, so relaxed and 0 speed IV means that we underspeed Tapu Bulu. So you will be able to get a Will-O-Wisp off onto Bulu under Trick Room. That is really impressive. I debated between Play Rough and Shadow Claw. Shadow Claw doesn't do enough damage to Marowak to justify its use, so I got rid of it, and we're back to Play Rough. There's really not much else to go. It's pretty straightforward there, but this is my favorite part right here. The EV spread. 236 HP, 212 defense, 60 special defense. Remember, we are relaxed nature. What this allows us to survive: Jolly Kartana, Smart Strike 100% of the time, Adamant Muck, Alola, Gunk Shot 100% of the time. In addition to that, Adamant Metagross has a 68.8% chance to 1-hit KO you with Meteor Mash. You also survive Scissor Bullet Punch. So fantastic, very fantastic. And as for the special side, there's not really that many special things that can hit it super effectively. So Gengar, Shadow Ball, Timid. It has to be timid, but you survive 100% of the time. Modest Gengar only has a 6.3% chance to 1-hit KO, so it's a pretty safe stay-in if you want to stay in. Not that you can really do very much to Gengar, but maybe you want to player off of Garchomp. I don't know. I don't know you. And then Modest Magnezone, it's pretty much exactly the same as Gengar, 6.3% chance to one-hit KO. And that's it. I mean, there's really not much else to go over here. This team is pretty basic. The EV spreads on Mimikyu, Porygon 2, and Drampa are the most complicated things, and Mimikyu is probably the most complicated because it's not entirely as bulky as Porygon 2. It's in fact much less bulky, but it does have the ability Disguise, and because of that, it's allowed to exist as a perfect Trick Room setter because for the most part you will survive attacks. Yeah, I mean, I definitely would suggest playing around with the items. Assault Vest on Vikavolt is very important to me, but it might not be something that you wanna take. You might want to take a look into Assault Vest Thick Fat Hariyama. You lose out on a lot of damage, but you do gain a lot of defensive prowess. Assault Vest Drampa and Berserk are also pretty decent options, but they're not exactly the greatest, if that makes sense. So yeah, this team will be up for as long as I can keep it up. I don't know how the QR codes work. This was a very long video, but I hope I explained everything in good detail. What you can do from here is just post any questions in the comments below if you have any. If you want to know specific reasonings behind something, or if like you're too lazy to run a calc and I'll do it for you, I don't care. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I hope to catch you guys at the next episode. Peace.